with these so-called band-aid augments that have been so common as of late, a lot of people I don't think realize why they are made and why they are intentionally, continually made, even though the community kind of doesn't seem to like them. I think that they actually serve a different purpose than what people realize. And that purpose is being taking away a mod slot from a Warframe that DE wants to take away a mod slot from, right? So, this is a bit of a complex idea, but the best way to describe it is, say you take, any given frame that has a quote-unquote band-aid augment, right? And you make that part of base kit. Augment is gone, make it part of base kit. Right? It's like, okay, this mandatory augment that you now have to put on your build is now part of base kit, and now suddenly that is an 8th mod slot that you have open to put whatever you want in. And there's a lot you can do with a single mod slot, I think. There's a lot you can do, and like, the difference between 7 and 8 mod slots when you're trying to do something very particular with a build is very noticeable. I think Corvex, for example, Corvex's 4 augment is, I think, a very, very good example of this. Although Corvex's 4 can work without the augment, I think it is just objectively better with. But if you take that away and then you give him an extra mod slot, he really does need that mod space. So giving him that space and then letting him keep his ability functioning as is does get pretty strong, I would say. Like, I would say that that is something that a lot of people don't consider. Now, it's like, do I personally think that this is a correct form of game design? Not necessarily, but I think I am trying to give, a devil's advocate a different perspective on why these augments are always made the way that they are, right? And I really do think that mod space is kind of this underthought about aspect when building Warframes. And, like, people don't realize that, oh, by having an essential augment for a Warframe, you take away a mod slot, and I think that's almost intentional, right? Because we see these Warframes, they come out, they're missing, like, that one linchpin for their ability, and then they get that in the form of an augment, right? And then that augment fixes their kit or whatever, and now they are down a mod slot. Usually it's very shortly after they come out that tends to happen. And like I said, I just think it's intentional at this point, considering how patternistic is, and this is kind of my reasoning for why that pattern exists, is because they want to control the amount of mod slots each individual Warframe has. Because I think if they took a Warframe and they said, okay, by default, it's just going to have 7 mod slots, I don't think the community would like that. I think they would like it infinitely less than what we have currently in the system. Right? I think that being the alternative to controlling the amount of slots that Warframe has for mods would just be completely inconsolable by the community, and I don't think that they would like that. And it's one of those things where it's like, how much does a single mod slot matter in the grand scheme of things? And, like, you would argue it's like, oh, it really doesn't make that much of a difference in practice. But I think it is partially the principle of, like, trying to keep the curve of power creep somewhat in check. And I think that that is actually fine. I think that to kind of limit how fast power creep can ramp up in the game by, making essential augments and by proxy taking away mod slots from newer Warframes who already have, like, really, really good base kits sometimes. I think that that's honestly not a big deal. And like that is okay if that is the reason. If they're just doing it because like there is the alternative to this where it's like they're just lazy and they're not trying to buff Warframes in weird ways. And they find that making augments is the alternative to like actually buffing the direct kits of frames. I think that that is that's just kind of dumb. But again, I have a little bit more faith in them than that. Like I said, I'd like to think that augments are designed the way they are for a reason. I really do think it boils down to mod capacity. Because, like, the augments themselves are always very low capacity. They never really, like, get in your way, right? So it's never, like, really an issue to fit them on the build. It's a matter of fitting the amount of mods on your build that you need. Yeah, again, like I said, there are other augments out there that are like, oh, this is an augment, right? Where it does fundamentally change how the ability works. And that is, I guess, the original, I guess, quote-unquote, definition slash use case of what an augment is. And I think that that is... Like, that's also fine. Like, I think that those should exist as well. But I think that augments as a secondary form of Warframe checks and balancing is not entirely invalid. But again, like I said, this is all very hypothetical speech, essentially. Like, I could be completely wrong in this. None of what I could be saying actually has any bearing on how they decide to make augments or why they decide to make them the way that they do. I am even then, I am actually leaning on more of the fact that it is a faster way to buff a given Warframe than to actually go in and hardwire change the abilities. Because slapping an augment requires so much less R&D than, like, changing the Warframe's base ability kit at its core. Like, again, especially if anyone has watched the dev stream option where they basically showcased the development process of Arcane's. Which was a very interesting watch, by the way. If anyone has not watched it, I would go and I would look at the dev stream where they showed that off. I don't remember. It was specifically Caliban's augment, his Razor Gyre augment that he got. That fully kind of that they gave like a development demonstration of making that augment. And it really does give a lot of insight to how a lot of these augments are created and visually work. So if you have not watched that dev stream, I would go and find it. I don't remember the exact number, but highly, highly recommend going and looking at that. And now, like I said, there's the other side of the argument where, you know, well, what if we do start to make a bunch of augments-based kit, right? Well, it's like, augments need to still exist, right? We can't just take every augment and just make it some option that you throw on the Warframe, you know? It's like I think there are a lot of augments out there that warrant being mods, because they do change the ability to enough where it's like, oh, this might not be the preferable way that you want to use the ability. And then it becomes the question of, okay, well, what augments deserve to be added to base kit versus what augments stay as augments, right? Like, you bring up that conversation, and that is a very... I would say that that's a very dangerous conversation to have, because I feel like no matter what you do, you're going to wind up kind of pissing someone off, so to speak. Like, Oh, it's like, okay, well, this becomes augment. It's like, okay, well, why didn't my frame get X, Y, and Z augment made into their base kit? You know, it feels like it brings up a lot of that rhetoric. And I think that that's not a conversation that they want to have. Also, I'm requeuing. This is horrible ping. And it's like, even if, again, quote unquote, easy to tell, it still raises the question, is that somewhere down the line, someone has to decide, you know? Someone has to make the choice. And it is like they would have to make an official choice, and they would have to acknowledge the problem as such, right? Like that's I think the other big step that I think a lot of people don't think about is they would have to acknowledge the problem, essentially. And like that's just, again, that's just a whole can of worms, right? Because if they don't acknowledge the problem, like, you know, there's no war in Ba Sing Se. Like, why do we have to address it, right? Address this problem that we don't think exists. And then therefore players can't bitch about, like, oh, why haven't you addressed this, and why have you left this as is, even though you know it exists? Like, so they can just feign ignorance and say that they don't know it exists, and now they don't have to, like, worry about having to answer for it. Which is why I think part of why this video exists, because it's all speculation. That's all we can do is speculate about this sort of thing.